Hello, everybody, and welcome again to Procrastinator's Pit Stop. We are again here with Michael A. Forman. He had a ton of information on our last episode talking about networking and the form method. And we all know that, networking is something that many business owners and, well, we all, we all procrastinate on networking. So without further ado, we're going to dive into that topic a little bit more, and we're going to get some more excellent insights here. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. Great to be here. I love talking about networking, communication, and how it affects anybody and everybody. So I'm all in.
So I actually wanted to hear it from you. What do you think is the aspect of networking that people will tend to either ignore or just put off because it's the most difficult part?
Well, for an extrovert, it's really simple, right? But when you walk into, let's say, a networking event, they see the wall of people and they kind of back off from that. They say, you know what? I don't think I really want to do this, or they're going to do it improperly. And they're going to not get the most out of the event because of their inhibitions. So by what I am asking your viewers to do is just to listen and to think about when they go to a networking event, how they approach the person, how they speak with the person, and how they follow up with the person.
And all of those are such important aspects. Even the approach. The approach involves, up to and including body language, isn't that right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you first meet somebody, of course, you're going to look them square in the eyes. Now, that sounds really simple to you and me. But if you look at these 20-something kids, 30-something kids, their eyes are going all over the place because they're so distracted. Approach them, give a proper handshake. And I say a proper handshake because you don't want it to be like a dead fish. You don't want it oh, hi, how are you? A firm handshake, because that instills confidence. So when you are confident, you're looking the person in the eye, your body language, because you square your body up to that person, everything spells confidence. And when you're more confident as a speaker, as a salesperson, then you have a little bit more attention than if you didn't.
The handshake is often something that, and this is going to sound like a totally stupid question, but it's a legitimate one. And I'm sure I'm not the only one with this question. The handshake, there's often a question of, is it one pump? Is it two? I've had strong ones. I've had weak ones. I've had, the 1-2 pump, and I've had the, hey, how are you doing for almost 5 minutes? What's the protocol?
Well, when you shake the person's hand, like I said, it has to be firm. And you kind of have to feel it with your hand when to let go. So you go in and you shake their hand and you attempt to dislodge, to take your hand away. If the person continues to hold your hand, you can make a joke of it. You can do what you have to do. But you know what? The 1 to 2 seconds is really quite enough.
So you've gone in, you've done your handshake. What's after that?
Okay, so let me just bring it back just a couple of steps. When you first walk into a networking event, they usually have sheets or forms or something, so you see the layout of the land. And you see what tables are there, and you see who you want to speak to, because that will give you a little bit of a plan, right? So that already is going to put you ahead of the mark. But you put that away, and you walk into the room, and you see tables set up, people talking. Pick a table, walk up to the table. Don't say a word. Don't talk. You're going to walk up to the table and you're going to listen. You're going to listen for the conversation. Is this a conversation that I want to be part of? Now remember, you are the professional. You are the expert in your field. You're not there to bake cupcakes with somebody and have a good time. You're there for a reason. So if the conversation comes around to you and it's not something that you want to be a part of, you haven't said a word yet. so you can politely bow out and go to the next table. But let's say that it is a conversation that you want to be a part of, and you say your 2 sentences of whatever, and you're saying it, you have enough behind you where I would say 2 of the people, let's say that they respond to you. So now you're kind of fixating on those people. Now, when you go and you start talking to that one person, let that person talk. And this is where the form comes in: family, occupation, recreation, and a message that you get onto the same level. All that is in your head because you'll find something to speak about. So, husband, wife, sister, brother, daughter, son, little league, football, cheerleading, whatever the case may be, let them talk. Because you know what? People love to talk about themselves. They love to talk about their families. Okay? Just short of them pulling out the pictures. So you let them talk, and then you kind of sway the conversation around to occupation. And say, well, what exactly do you do? And then let them expand on it. Now, you haven't identified yourself. You haven't said who you are, what you do, or anything like that. They're just talking. And then when he's done, now you're listening. That is such an important part of this. You have to listen to what he's saying. And then you pause. Why is that pause so important? Because when they speak to you, when you pause, you didn't just come right out and say something. That means that you were an active listener. You actually listened to what they had to say. And you're not saying things that you wanted to say in the conversation. You're responding to what he had said. So after all this, say, okay, you know what? I like you. I like the way that you do business. How can I make you more successful? How can I be a good referral source for you? And it usually blows him away, but he'll tell you. And then if you've done your job correctly, he'll turn around and say, what's your name? What do you do? And it'll go on back and forth. And when you exchange those business cards, I'll get to that in a minute. But to exchange the cards, when you take his card or her card, you write down the date, the name of the function, and something you spoke about. And you make some small talk, and you move on. Now, I say that because I was in the mortgage industry for about 10 or 12 years. And I went to 1,000 networking events. I came home with a shoebox full of business cards. And I said, wow, what a successful night. But in reality, ask me about any one of those business cards, I wouldn't know who belonged to what. So my suggestion, after going to a networking event, a 3 or 4 hours worth, you shouldn't come home with more than 15 or 20 business cards. Now, why only 15 or 20? Because that told me that I created that relationship with that person. Now, remember, there's a mantra with networking. They have to know you, like you, and trust you to do business with you. Now, know you, Chris, you're a great guy. Everybody knows you. Likes you, that kind of narrows the field down a little bit, right? Okay, so know you and like you. That's only the first 2/3. That trust factor is so crucial that when you're letting the other person talk, the other person is speaking, that trust factor is building and that wall is coming down. So that's the beginning of your relationship.
Yes, and the trust factor, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we touched on that in the last show. Some of that trust factor is actually included, and again, correct, I might be wrong here. Was that included as part of the next step, the follow-up? Is that part of the trust process as well?
Well, the trust factor is really from the moment that you are in touch with your client or prospective client. because you have to, listen, you have to speak with authenticity. You have to be yourself. Because just imagine if you weren't yourself and you went to another event 2 weeks later and you bumped into the same person, you would have to remember what version of yourself you were. Otherwise, where is it? Okay. So my best advice would be just to be yourself, be present, but be yourself. Now, after this whole meeting process and you have 15 or 20 cards, there is a follow-up. And it's a very good follow-up, but it's kind of like my secret sauce. If you do the follow-up correctly, if you follow my lead, and I say only lead because there are different ways that you can do everything that I say. Listen, I'm not perfect, but this way has worked for me, and this has been my golden rule. So you want me to go into it?
Please.
Okay. All right. So let's say you finish the evening and you have these 15 cards. The minute you go back home or back to the office, whichever it may be, you're going to write an email thanking them for their time. Hey, Chris, this is Mike. I had a great time tonight. I want to thank you for giving me your time. I hope you're well, Michael. That's it. No business, no anything. It's just an email. And you have about a 20% chance of the other person responding to that email. Okay? The next morning, you take out your thank you notes. In my briefcase, I have a stack of thank you notes. And I pull one out. How you doing, Chris? This is Mike. I met you on such and such date at such and such an event. We spoke about your wife, your son, your child, whatever. Hope we can do business soon. Michael, put your business card in there and send it off. Now, you wait 3 or 4 days because you need time to have that reach the person. What do you think the effect is from a person receiving a thank you note? It's incredible. The person, because it's not a bill, it's not anything else, it's simply a thank you note. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to save it. And they'll have your card as well. So I just upped your 20% chance to about a 50% chance. Now, most businesses would kill for a 50% chance of them returning your email. They would return your email, say, thank you for the card, or thank you, it was great meeting you, or something like that. All I'm looking for is a response. That's all I'm looking for, positive or negative, a response. But let's say you're a stick in the mud and you have not returned my email. So after that 4th day or so, I send you another email. Hey, Chris, this is Mike. I met you on such and such date at such and such an event. We spoke about your wife, son, daughter, whatever. Now, remember, I am putting this into every single email that I send you. The date, the name of the function, and everything else, because what is that going to do? I'm going to be remembered. Either I'm going to be remembered as the pain in the ass, or I'm going to be remembered as the person who follows up. So listen, I hope you got my thank you note. I hope all is well, Michael, and send it. Now, I'm just assuming that you still have not sent me back an email yet. So I'm waiting about 2 days or so, 2 or 3 days. Hey, Chris, this is Mike. I met you on such and such date, such and such an event. We spoke about your wife, son, daughter, whatever. I think he was in Little League. I hope he's doing well. Listen, I just noticed that Tuesday and Wednesday of next week is pretty clear for me. How is one of those days to get together? Michael, usually, no, I'm upping it to about 50, 60, closer to 70%. There's such a good chance of you responding to either say, no, I'm really not interested, or those days look pretty good. Let me check my schedule, something like that. I need something, some sort of a response. Let's say you still didn't respond to me. Going to write another email 2 or 3 days later. Hey, Chris, this is Mike. I met you on such date, such event. We spoke about your wife, daughter, whatever. I said that Tuesday and Wednesday were pretty open for me. Tuesday kind of closed up. I'm getting a little busy. How is Wednesday? And sign it, send it off. Now, usually after all this, they're going to respond to you. But let's say that you didn't because you're that type of a person. 3 or 4 days later, you're going to write, hey, Chris, this is Mike. I met you on such and such date at such and such an event. We spoke about your wife, your son in Little League. I said Tuesday and Wednesday were open. Tuesday was kind of full. Wednesday seemed to be filling up as well. Is there a good time that we can meet? Sign it. Okay. So if you still haven't sent back an email, that usually means you're not interested. You don't want to send an email. You just want to, that's it. So what do you do? What do you do with that card, with his information? You put into your CRM. You put all his information in. You put all the notes in. All the times that you sent an email, that you sent a thank you card, you sent everything. And you put him on a drip campaign. Once a month, send an email. Hey, Chris, how you doing? This is Michael. Remember, I met you on such and such date, such event. We spoke about your wife. Just checking with you, to see if I can be of any help. Now, what I just gave you is a secret sauce because I would say 95% of the people will send you an email back. They will say, no, I'm sorry, I'm not interested. Or, yeah, well, you know what? This week was really bad for me. How's next week on Thursday? Sure, fine, no problem. And then there's another whole thing that you can do when you meet with that person and you sit down with them. You're kind of like bringing in part of when you first met him, to let him talk, things like that. That first meeting should never be, in the first 5 minutes, business. Don't bring business up. See how they're doing, how their wife is doing, how their son is doing. Talk about anything and everything. Then get to business.
So I was trying to do some finger counting there. I mean, that's following up a total of, I think it was, well, including the thank you note, about 6 times.
Not 6 times. Yeah. About 6 times in 2 weeks. So the first one is the same night. The second one is a thank you note. You have to wait 3 or 4 days. So that's 4 days. You touch them twice. Then, of course, there is always the soft connect. LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. You find them. You connect with them that way and say, hey, thanks for connecting with me. I just met you on such and such date. I talked about such and such, and that makes them remember, because it's funny, if they're on LinkedIn, they won't necessarily remember you by emailing. It's like you're two separate people. You're kind of like, yeah, it's really bringing it together. And you could do Facebook and Instagram as well. You have to see about your platform of choice, which one you want to stick with. When I post or whatever I do any of this work, I do it all primarily on LinkedIn, but I follow it up with Facebook, Instagram, and of course, I've got a YouTube channel.
Well, that's actually one thing I was going to ask you. I've heard a couple of differing opinions. Some people say shotgun it. Some people say just pick one and get really good at it. I guess you're of the view that you have one you do really well, and then keep the others as sort of sidelines.
Ancillary, probably, towards the main platform. I choose LinkedIn for business, and I do everything that way. When I want to connect with somebody, if I want to say, okay, Chris, great. I found this article about home improvement. It's right up your alley. I thought you'd be interested in that. That's it. So I'd link that with my LinkedIn connection and do it that way. You have about a 40% chance of them responding, saying that, oh, thank you. That's a good piece of information. But when you email them, then you clip that piece of information and you put it with it and send it. As usually, I have one client that's a roofer, a roofing company in Ohio. And it's a metal roofing company. And whenever something comes up, when they're comparing an asphalt roof to a metal roof, there's an article, I'll clip it and I'll send it to them just to keep me top of mind.
I like that. I don't think I've heard that one before. The one thing I have seen, you're talking about that drip campaign for about a month. I have had it where I've been to an event and I don't have a newsletter, but people say that you should just take that information and stick them on the newsletter. They'll unsubscribe if they feel like it. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I don't have a newsletter either. Okay. However, when I was in the mortgage industry, I had a newsletter and I put everybody's name on it. If they want to unsubscribe, they can always unsubscribe. But you should always, as part of that follow-up campaign, that drip campaign, yes, you can use a newsletter, but you don't have to. You can just word the email. You can have it in a template and have it all go out at the same time. Now, you can use those contact, MailChimp, and everything like that to house all of your names if you want to send one message out to everybody.
And when we're talking about just being able to stick out, because again, there's like well, I don't know how many different events, but there could be upwards of 700, maybe even 1,000 people at these events sometimes. How do you stand out how do I say this, without being over the top?
Well, me personally, I use humor. Okay. I've always found myself to be a funny person. My kids think I'm a funny looking person. So I take all of that and I put humor in wherever I go. Whatever table I wind up at, I introduce that little bit of humor. When I'm on stages and I'm speaking about networking communication, I'm always putting in humor, always bring in a story, because people will remember stories more so than they would remember you. So if you bring up interesting stories, oh, that's the guy with the story. That's right. Or, oh, that's the guy who was self-deprecating, that I remember him. So I introduce something like that. Listen, you're not going to see everybody because you physically can't do that. But you have to make the most out of the time you have and the people that you're introduced to. Now, I put a lot of emphasis on the face-to-face, on the meeting, networking events, meeting your prospective clients, so on and so forth. And I do that for a very good reason. I pick up a vibe from the person. I pick up a vibe from the room, and it usually tells me about the event itself. If when I'm talking at a table and I get a bad vibe, I'm just going to quickly bow out and go to the next table because I don't like the discussion. I don't like some of the people, the way they look. I don't know. But I'm just going to bow out, go to the next table, and everything is okay. Okay? You can't do that over Zoom, over a text. You can't feel anything. But when you're in person, you can. You can see through them also. So you can see if they're not a funny person, but they're trying to get humor into it, and they do that joke and it doesn't really land. And you're like, it's okay. You really shouldn't have tried that, but okay. You have to see the people, feel the people, and that's how you really get to know the person.
And of course, that's part of that, I guess, KLT sandwich, right? The know you, like you, trust you.
Know you, like you, and trust you. They'll do business with you.
And, just going into what you went on a little bit before about serving others, about doing more. I think we discussed this last time. You had the golden rule and then you had the platinum rule, right? Do more for others than you would have them do for you, or how was it that you worded it?
You walk into a networking event. Never walk into a networking event expecting to sell anything. Your services, a product, anything like that. Your goal should be, how can you be a good referral source for somebody else? How can you make somebody else more successful? What can you do for that person? Because you know what? What you'll get out of it was, you know what? Michael, that's right. He wanted to do this for me. He wanted to do that. He gave me this. He gave me this tip. And I'll always remember this tip and things like that. Always look to give. It will come back around to you when those people remember who you are, what you did, and everything else, saying, you know what, he's a good guy. I've got to get him some business.
That's
Reciprocity. Right. But when you brought the cookies over, you don't expect anything in return. But that's the way that it should be handled. That's the way your typical networking should be handled. Now, with networking, communication is such a major part of networking. And the communication aspect of it, listen, if your viewers are in high school, in college, waiting to get a job, anything like that, pay attention to what we're talking about. Because the person that you're interviewing with is probably a Gen X or a baby boomer or something else like that. And you're just a Gen Z. I'm saying you're just a Gen Z. I'm saying that for a reason. If I just pull you out of that for a second, 1,000 employers were asked these questions. What is it about Gen Z you don't want to keep them in your company? And I'm like, what? You don't want to keep a Gen Zer in your company? They lack professionalism. They're lazy. They don't want to get the job done. Every time that they get stressed out, they take 3 days off from work. They don't want to work more than a 6-hour day. If they work more than that, they feel that they're overworked, that they want to work a 3 to 5 day week, forget about weekends. And all these things are piling up. And I'm like, this can't be real. What, forget it. And then I saw it come out as an article in a magazine. I saw it as like an Instagram post. I saw it come out in I forgot what it was, like a newsletter or something. And it all pointed to the same thing, written slightly different, but they all pointed to the same thing. When I go out and I speak to high schools about this very same thing, I now include all of those stats.
And just for the benefit of anyone listening who is in that basket, the form method works for one-on-one interviews as well.
Correct. Everybody. That works for everybody. You can be an 18-year-old student or just graduating and looking for your job, looking for the first job, and you're on your interview. Take note of what is in that person's office. Okay? Are there pictures? Pictures of a wife, of a husband, of a little league picture, sports, major league, NFL, doesn't make a difference. Music, art, there's always something. It's not going to be a dead office. So see what it is. He's got a big musical note on his wall. Are you interested in music? What type of music? Really? So am I. What about this? What about that? If it's a little league picture, is that your son? Little league? Your grandson? Whichever. Doesn't make a difference. That's great. What position does he play? And just talk about it that way. You can introduce yourself by being a part of their world. That's usually the best way.
And that'll set you apart from most other
Everybody
interviews.
else. So, all right. So let's work on this just a little bit more. You have your interview. What do you do? So you go back home and you're going to send that person an email thanking him for his time. If there's anything else I can get for you, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll await your decision. You send it off the very same night. And it's amazing how that will put you ahead of somebody else who just walked in, handed a resume, did the interview, went home.
Right. But we stop it at that, right? We don't send them 6.
No, right.
A thank you note and all this, like,
yeah. Otherwise it becomes stalking. So, no.
It makes a lot of sense. So, their practice with business cards, I know a lot of people are using virtual business cards now. I mean, it's the same idea. You're only looking for that same amount, that same sweet spot.
Yeah. Well, the virtual business cards, I have one also, just for those instances that that's what they use. And you usually just touch your phone to it and your contact information goes in. So that's great. But you have to then take the time to go into your phone and write down all the notes that you would have on the back of your card. So it's a little more time consuming. I prefer the regular business card. Now, for your business cards, it should just be that. It's not a billboard. It's not a sign company. In other words, you don't put on everything that you do on the business card. You put down your name, your phone numbers, your email address, your website, and that's it. And then you exchange cards, you write down everything you have to do. Okay? Because when somebody looks at your card, now I know this, I owned a graphic design studio. My wife's a graphic designer. When somebody looks at your card, if it's not clean looking, they'll think twice. It gives you just that much more of an edge.
So try not to be gimmicky.
Don't be gimmicky. Gimmicky? Gimmicky?
I don't know. I threw it out there. Try not to use a gimmick.
Yeah, well, whichever. It works. It works. Yeah, but you don't, if you have to rely on gimmicks, then you're not there to sell anything. You're not, what do you truly have to offer if you're relying on some gimmicks to help you get through the door? When I say be yourself, be present. If you're a fun person, you're going to come out as being a fun person. If you're a stick in the mud, well, that's where you have to learn a little, right? So when you go to networking events, and I'm a big proponent on going to networking events. Now, if you go to meetup.com or something else, you can probably find no less than 1,000 networking meeting events every month, right? So you pick a few in your area, you go to them, join your Chamber of Commerce, because each week you can kind of work on what you're saying and networking about. Afterwards, they have an after hours meeting, something in the networking event. 20 people go to that, start small, because when I say this to a lot of my students that I coach, when you go out to a major networking event and you're trying to do everything that I'm telling you to do, you're going to suck. Okay. You're going to be horrible at it. You're just saying, well, why did I go in the first place? Because you're learning, right? You learn to do everything. So you did about 40% of the things that I wanted you to do in the order that I wanted you to do them. Well, the next time you do 50, then 60, then maybe 80, then 90. So by the fourth or fifth time, you actually got it right, and you can then begin to enjoy the networking event, because that's the other thing. You have to enjoy yourself. You have to look like you're having a decent time. Not too good, but a good time.
So here's a question for you as well about those networking events. You know how they have ABC always be closing or whatever, right? You throw that out the window. But
out the window.
What about ABN? Always be networking. So if you're stuck in line at the grocery store, get involved in.
Absolutely. ABN. That's good, because I'm going to have to use that from now on, because you should be always networking. If you're in a line in a grocery store and you hear a conversation and you can add something to it of value, that's very important, not just to turn around and say, hey, how you doing? If you can add something, turn around, you can suggest something or tell them something or give them a piece of advice, and you turn back around, right? If they're interested, they're going to ask you a question. It's like the 30-second elevator speech. I say is really 5 seconds, because all you're doing, you want that person to respond to you, ask you, what was that? Or how do you do that? Or where was that? And that will begin the conversation. Now, everything that I gave you was really for an extrovert. Okay, that person that wants to go out to that networking event. And I always say go alone. Go to these events by yourself, because you don't want to have that crutch. You don't want, if things aren't going right, you can turn to that person and you're going to start talking. That's going to take you away from everything. So go alone. But if you are an introvert, don't go alone. you want to go with somebody. I call it a wingman. I'm an Air Force person, so I say wingman. And this is sister, brother, a coworker, somebody that knows you very well and knows what you do very well. So let's just go all the way back to the beginning when you're walking up to the table and you're listening for the conversation, the whole thing, and it is something that you want to be a part of and that you have something you can give to. Goes around and your wingman will say, you know something, that's great. Michael is a graphic designer and he knows a lot about that marketing edge. Michael, what do you think? Because now that introvert doesn't see everybody, just sees the one person or sees the table. And they're much more anxious to talk. And once you have an introvert, once they start talking, then everything is golden. So that's not going to stop you from being an introvert. But after what I said, that fourth or fifth networking event, by having your wingman there all the time, you'll begin to not need that person anymore.
That is some really great advice there. You usually hear about wingmans, when you're trying to go out and look for a significant other, to make you look better or whatever like that.
Right, exactly. So I kind of put a different twist on it.
No, I mean, that's really brilliant because it's sort of like that poke, right? Like, oh, you should be moving, you should be doing something.
Right, absolutely, and that's a good poke. And this is all just to get you involved. And, there's another situation where when you go to that after hours chamber event, that networking event, let me just very quickly, usually if you go to these things and you become one of those 20 people that always go to those meetings, everybody pretty much knows everybody. But now you're going to see somebody walk through the door and immediately go to the wall, and they're introverted or they're shy or something. You have to take it upon yourself to walk up to the person. How you doing? Hey, what's your name? What do you do? Oh, that's great. You know something? That table over there is filled with marketing people right up your alley. Come on, let me introduce you. So you're introducing that person and then you step away. Now you've just elevated yourself in their eyes. So they will always remember you and what you do.
Like that. And actually, this has been a really great conversation. We're coming up pretty close to time. One last thing before we go, I know that you revamped or you upped or you recreated a digital course. Can you let us know about that?
I did. If you want to really know all about networking and how to really do it, I wrote a book, Networking Unleashed. You can go to my website, michaelaforman.com. But on that website, I've also just completed a digital course where it's for purchase, but you can buy it, and that will then teach you exactly what we just talked about. And it will really kind of put into your head and give you different scenarios. It's really good, really interesting, and you'll get a lot out of it. So you go to my website, michaelaforman.com.
Excellent. Well, and once again, just to all our listeners, don't worry about grabbing a pencil and paper because we will have that in the show notes for you. Really easy to find. Michael, it's been a pleasure having you on the show again. I just feel like this is such a big topic. Always love to have your insights. Is there anything else? Any closing comments you'd like to give to the viewer?
Well, usually what I say is if you can take one takeaway, if you can do one thing today or tomorrow that will start you on your networking career, those thank you notes, those handwritten thank you notes, you can write those thank you notes to a prospective client, those thank you notes to a prospective employer. You can do a thank you note to the Chinese food place where you always get your Chinese food. You can write that thank you note to just about anybody, and it will elevate you, but what those people think of you.
I might just have to start doing that with DoorDash, Skip the Dishes, and Amazon so they stop running over my mailbox.
Probably.
Anyway, it's been great. Thank you so much, Michael. And once again to our viewers, thank you so much for tuning in. And just remember, if you can't find that motivation or inspiration for yourself today, maybe just go out and try to be that motivation or inspiration for someone else. And we'll see you again next time.
Sounds good.